Welcome to Wisdom Unveiled. Just a quick reminder, this is a translation based on conversations with Iranian philosophers, so some nuances might not come across perfectly. We do apologize for any discrepancies there.
Absolutely.
Today, we're really diving deep into the thought of, well, the brilliant Khajeh Nasir al-Din Tusi.
A major figure.
Definitely. Our mission really is to unpack Tusi's view of the spiritual seeker. Specifically looking at these three figures, the Zahid, the Abid, and the Arif.
Right. And we're drawing this from those 12 Ma'rifat audio files, the discussions with Dr. Dinani and Dr. Larijani.
Exactly. They touch a lot on Ibn Sina's Maqamat and Tusi's commentary on it. So let's start there, maybe, with the definitions.
Good idea. So based on those discussions around Ibn Sina, the Zahid is basically the one who turns away from the pleasures, the good things of the world.
Okay, turns away. Does that mean like becoming a hermit? Or is it something else?
It's more subtle, usually. It's not necessarily about total physical isolation, though it could be. It's more about an inner detachment, not being captivated by worldly things.
Right, not letting them pull you off course.
Okay.
And the Abid?
The Abid is the worshiper, the one who's really diligent, consistent in performing acts of worship.
Both the ones you have to do and the extra ones.
Exactly. The obligatory prayers, fasts, and so on, but also the supererogatory ones, the nafil or nafile. It's about that constant, careful practice.
Okay, so Zahid is detachment, Abid is devotion and practice. Now the Arif, this is where things get really interesting, as you said.
Yes, the Arif, the knower. Ibn Sina's initial definition, which Tusi engages with, describes the Arif as someone who turns their mind al-anṣaraf bi-fikrihī towards the sacred realm, towards Quds al-Jabarūt.
Quds al-Jabarūt, the sacred realm of power, majesty.
Something like that, the realm of divine majesty, the source. But it's not just turning the mind, the definition adds another layer. It's being continually illuminated by the light of truth in their innermost being. Mustadiman li shuruk nur al-haq fi sirrihi.
Continual illumination. Wow, so it's not just thinking about God, it's something more.
Exactly. It's not about not thinking. The Arif thinks deeply, but the thought is directed, focused purely towards the divine, away from base thoughts, worldly distractions. And that pure, focused thought, according to the definition, becomes receptive. It gets enlightened by this divine light, this nur al-haq.
So the thought itself is crucial. It's not mindless ecstasy.
Not at all. In fact, the discussions emphasize that thought itself is seen as originating from a higher realm, the malakut, the spiritual world, not just, bubbling up from matter.
That really puts intellect aql front and center for the Arif, doesn't it?
Absolutely. A key point that comes through is that an Arif who doesn't think, who doesn't use their intellect, isn't really an Arif in this specific sense.
So the whole spiritual journey, the Sulūk, it belongs to the intellect.
That's a strong theme. It's an intellectual path, a path of understanding and realization, which pushes back against intellectual laziness, tambali fikri.
Right, just sort of coasting on unexamined beliefs.
Exactly. You know the saying, everyone has a right to their opinion. Well, the emphasis here is on the importance of critically reflecting on those opinions. Where do they come from? Are they grounded?
Because thought isn't static, is it? It's meant to move, to transcend.
Precisely. Thought, by its nature, involves growth, reaching beyond. And Tusi was fully on board with this. He stressed that real conviction, real certainty comes from the intellect. Beliefs without that intellectual grounding, well, they don't hold much weight for him.
Okay, so Tusi appreciates Ibn Sina's definition, but he doesn't just leave it there. He brings in Imam Ali.
He does. He thinks Ibn Sina's definition is excellent, but he adorns it, enhances it, using this incredible passage from Imam Ali describing the true knower.
Which passage is that?
It's Wow,
okay, let's break that down. Aya aqlahu.
He gave life to his intellect. This is powerful. It implies that for many people, the intellect is sort of asleep, or maybe even dead, in the sense of not having hayat maqul, rational life.
So it needs activating.
It needs to be brought to life, engaged fully. Then, amata nafsahu.
He killed his ego or his lower self.
Yes, the struggle against the demanding self, the nafs, that's crucial.
And taqwa jalalahu.
He refined the grand aspects within him, making the subtle parts even finer.
Okay, polishing the inner core. And latufa galizahu.
His coarseness became refined. This is about transforming inner roughness, what they call gilzat.
Gilzat. What does that mean exactly? Like being rough around the edges?
It's more than that. It's a kind of inner rigidity Maybe stubbornness, a lack of understanding, emotional volatility. It's the opposite of subtlety and insight.
So living intellect smooths that out.
Exactly. It transforms that coarseness, that gilzat, into latafat refinement, purity, spiritual sensitivity. It softens the rigidity.
That makes sense. And the last part, Barako lahu lamyun kathir.
A radiant light shone upon him in abundance, or a great brilliance flashed for him.
Which connects right back to Ibn Sina's illumination of the light of truth.
Precisely. It's the same idea. The light is always there, like the sun. Our ability to see it, to receive it, depends on our inner state. If the mirror is polished, it reflects.
So the intellect and purification prepare the way for that light.
That's the idea. And this leads to Tusi's point about Zahid and idāt, asceticism and worship. While the Arif's goal is this intellectual ascent and gnosis, Zahid and ibadah aren't skipped over.
They're necessary steps.
Necessary groundwork. He calls them muqarribāt, preliminaries. They help achieve that anṣaraf fiqh.
The turning away of the mind.
Yes. Turning away from worldly distractions, which Zahid and ibadah facilitate, so the mind can focus on the sacred realm, on Quds al-Jabarūt.
So they clear the ground for the real work of the intellect.
You could put it that way. Tusi actually describes the seeker's journey in 3 stages related to this. First, the seeker turns away from what they believe distances them from their goal.
Okay, irad ama yatakidu anahu yabudu an matlubi. Rejecting the obstacles.
Right. Then second, they turn towards what they believe brings them closer.
Iqbal alama yatakidu anahu yuqarribuhu ila matlubi. Embracing the means.
Exactly. And third, the journey culminates when they actually find the desired goal. Yantahi inda wujdan al-matlub.
Finding the goal itself.
Yes. And for the seeker of truth, the ṭayyibātihā, Tusi says this initial turning away has to involve rejecting what occupies them, especially, he notes, the pursuit of worldly goods and pleasures. Siyama ma yashghaluhu min talabi matā al-dunyā wa ṭayyibātihā.
So recognizing what pulls you away is the first step.
Crucially, yes. And notice the word yatakidu, what they believe distances or brings closer. This points to the importance of shanakh knowledge recognition at every single stage.
You need to know what to avoid, what to pursue, and what the goal actually is.
Precisely. Without that shanakh, even acts of zahid and ibadat might be misplaced or lack true meaning.
So there's a hierarchy here,
Right.
and Arif has gone through the stages, effectively.
That's the idea. A Zahid or an Abid might not be an Arif. But an Arif, by definition, is a Zahid and an Abid. They have turned from other than God and are devoted.
Okay.
And Tusi adds another layer here, deeply rooted in his Shi'a perspective.
Which is?
He connects the Zahid and ibadat of the Arif fundamentally to tabara and tawala.
Dissociation from the enemies of truth and loyalty to the friends of truth.
Exactly. For Tusi, these aren't separate political or social stances. They are integral to the Arif's inner turning away, Zahid, and turning towards ibadat. They are the twin wings, you might say, of the intellect's flight towards truth.
Wow, so Zahid isn't just detachment from wealth, it's detachment from falsehood itself. And ibadat isn't just prayer, it's allegiance to truth and its representatives.
That's a very Tusi perspective.
Yeah.
And it all leads to the ultimate goal.
Which is finding the truth.
Finding the truth, washada al-haq. And Tusi says something profound. The very first stage of finding the truth is marifah.
Gnosis. Experiential knowledge.
Yes, not just knowing about God, but that direct experiential knowing. And he clarifies that marifah itself has degrees. The journey culminates in reaching this state.
And Tusi mentioned that seekers might be in different situations, alone or together.
Right. He acknowledges that circumstances differ. Ikhtilaf al-arad. People might be on this path individually or maybe in pairs or groups, but the ideal, the completed Arif, embodies all 3 qualities: Zahid, Abid, and Arif.
Now, you mentioned earlier that the understanding of Zahid and ibadat changes with marifah.
Yes, this was a key distinction made in the discussions. For someone without marifah, Zahid might look like a transaction.
Like, I give up this worldly pleasure now to get a reward in heaven later.
Exactly. Trading the temporary for the permanent. It's a calculated move based on belief. But for the Arif who has marifah, Zahid isn't a transaction, it's just the natural state of being. Their whole being is so focused on the truth, on reality, that everything else just seems insignificant by comparison. It's not about forcing themselves to give things up, it's that those things have lost their pull.
So it flows from their knowledge, their marifah.
Precisely. And the same distinction applies to ibadat, worship.
So for the person without marifah, worship is?
Again, potentially transactional. doing actions here, like prayer or charity, expecting a specific recompense later, following the rules to gain reward or avoid punishment.
Right. Kind of spiritual accounting.
Whereas for the Arif, well, the discussion was heading towards explaining that for the Arif, idāt is an expression of that marifah, a direct communion, a spontaneous outpouring of love and recognition, not primarily motivated by future reward, though the source materials seem to cut off a bit there.
Ah, okay. But the core distinction is clear. Action based on belief versus action flowing from direct knowing.
Exactly, and this connects to another point raised. The idea that pure thought, fikr, contemplation is considered the purest form of worship. Kalis tarin ibadat.
Purer than prayer or fasting. Why?
Because, as the discussion suggested, outward actions can always be tainted, potentially, by riyā.
Ostentation. Showing off for others.
Yes, you can pray beautifully to impress people, but pure inner contemplation directed towards God's reality and greatness is harder to fake. It's between you and the divine.
Is there a basis for that idea?
Yes, they mentioned a hadith attributed to Imam Reza, A.S. Lays al-ibadatu likatrat salati wal siyam, inama ibadatu likatrat tafakkur fi amr Allah wa azamatihi.
Which means?
Roughly. Worship is not in the abundance of prayer and fasting, but rather worship is the abundance of contemplation on the affairs of Allah and His greatness.
So thinking deeply about reality is worship.
In its highest form, potentially. And again, Tusi brings it back. He strongly links Zod and Ibadat to Tabara and Tawala.
That Shi'a framework is always present.
It's central to his synthesis. He saw this dissociation from falsehood and allegiance to truth as the very essence of true Zord and Ibadat, and indeed the core of Shi'ism itself. He was instrumental in integrating this Imami perspective into philosophy, theology, and mysticism.
And there's no doubt about Tusi's commitment, or even Ibn Sina's, within that tradition.
No, the scholars in our sources were clear. Both are held in extremely high regard. Any doubts about their Shia credentials were dismissed. Remember Ibn Sina's famous line about Imam Ali?
Oh, right. Calling him something like the intelligible amidst the sensible.
Exactly. A profound statement showing deep reverence and understanding.
So wrapping this part up, Tusi gives us this really layered picture. The seeker moves through stages, or maybe integrates them: detachment, Zahid, devotion, Abid, leading ultimately to knowing, Arif.
Right. And the engine driving this, refining it, is the intellect, the aql.
Which needs to be brought to life.
Brought to life, purified alongside the self, and directed towards truth.
And Zod and Ibadat are the essential groundwork, understood most deeply through Marifah, and for Tusi, inseparable from Tabara and Tawala.
That's a great summary. It's a path where intellect, purification, devotion, and knowing all work together, culminating in that direct experiential gnosis, Marifah.
It's a demanding path, but one focused on profound transformation. So as you reflect on all this, think about how this framework, these stages, this emphasis on active intellect, might connect with your own ideas about personal growth or the search for deeper meaning.
It definitely gives you a lot to consider.
It really does. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive into Khajeh Nasir al-Din Tusi on Wisdom Unveiled.